Hey again everyone, Lex here, and today I'm presenting you 3 tried and true Shield Warrior builds that have more or less survived the Shield Wall nerfs and will serve as great options for League starters in 0.5. These are builds I spent a lot of time playing and optimizing in 0.4, and though the nerfs affected a couple of them, I'm confident in saying that they have mostly survived with some adjustments, and the bleed build I'm going to go over has barely been touched. It's still a crazy strong option. So in this video I'll go over each build, one for each warrior ascendancy, and how each plays in typical endgame activities, what makes them strong for these activities, what leveling looks like when progressing through the campaign, etc. That's enough of an intro. As a quick note, I have MOBALYTICS links to all of these builds below and have spent a lot of time writing up just how you should progress through the campaign and the general strategies when approaching damage and boss fights, support gems you should be using, etc. Currently, the meat of these guides is found at those links, as this is more of an overview video on how these play and very briefly what leveling looks like and a bit about how to progress through the campaign. So please check out those links and favorite them if you want a little more guidance, as there is a lot written out there, and I will be definitely updating them one by one as I progress through the campaign in 0.5 and make dedicated videos for each build. I'll also update them, with things like rune shaping suggestions, any new supports or passive skill tree options, and all that fun stuff. But yeah, let's get into it. The first build, which is, as I mentioned, the Spear and Shield Bleed Titan. This build came to be when I saw a few builds using the Herald of Blood, Bleed, and Poison and Bursting Plague chains. Just seemed like a really efficient way to clear. So for fun, I decided to play around with a sword and board-like build where you are getting equal value out of your weapon and shield, and this build came to be. You basically spam Rake to clear maps, and Shield Wall and Fortifying Cry is your heavy hitter against bosses with the right setup, and we've gone with the Titan Ascendancy here as it just made the most sense to boost up our tankiness and bleed magnitude from the passive skill tree via hulking form. As a quick note, I know what you're thinking. No, this build does not rely on the now nerfed shotgun effect from Fortifying Cry and Shield Wall. I played around with just detonating Shield Wall with Infernal Cries only, and it works amazingly. We're really just concerned about Shield Wall hitting as hard as possible and aggravating the subsequent bleed it inflicts. That's where 90% of our damage is coming from, not Fortifying Cry. One downside is that Leech did get hit with some nerfs in the patch notes, but overall I think this build will be fine. We may just have to invest in some higher Leech percentages here and there to get consistent value out of the Coater of Crimson, which, if you don't know, lets you overleech your life by 50%. So you basically have 50% increased maximum life if you're leeching enough to cap that out, and that is a huge portion of where our survivability comes from. But other than that, this is pretty easy to put together. You just need a high armor shield, Coater of Crimson, which is a pretty cheap unique, and a decent spear, which can mostly deterministically be crafted, but with the most updated patch notes, we're only allowed one deterministic mod, so this will likely be adjusted. I was following a crafting guide by the Exiled Rat Lord, who was running a different spear build, so we'll see if he comes out with an updated video, but if not, I think you'll still get some crafting ideas from the old one, and desecrated mods don't count as these deterministic mods, so you can have a desecrated mod and an essence mod on one spear. You'll still likely be able to craft something that's decent. Anyways, against bosses, it's basically just spamming Resonating Shield socketed with Ulrich Smelting to fully break armor, then removing it with Spear Stab socketed with Exploit Weakness over and over until we're at full Ulrich Smelting stacks. And the way this works is that Ulrich Smelting applies a permanent 5% increased fizz damage taken debuff on the target every time you fully break the target's armor. So you really just have to fully break the armor 4 times with our setup to get to that maximum 20% increased fizz damage taken from Ulrich Smelting. Then we want to get ready with our Shield Wall Fortifying Cry combo. We are using Nebulock here with our second weapon set, which is our Shield Wall set, so before we use this combo, we want to make sure we have some endurance charges allowing us to benefit from Nebulock's effect. Attacks have 100% critical strike chance at the cost of consuming an endurance charge. We have a chance to generate endurance charges from Resonating Shield, which is also socketed with Armor Break 3, and just Magma Barrier triggering on boss attacks. Once the boss has full Ulrich Smelting stacks, fully broken armor, and you have a couple of endurance charges, you just combo away twice or thrice, and the damage and subsequent bleed inflicted should be quite potent. And we achieve these crazy damage numbers by all of the bleed magnitude we have on the passive skill tree, and in weapon set 2 we have a bunch of critical damage nodes on the passive skill tree as well, and through your gear and gems and all that fun stuff. You want to stack a bunch of critical damage bonus to get the most out of the Nebulock criticals, since you don't have to worry about critical hit chance at all. Just stack critical damage bonus and you'll be hitting really hard. As far as clearing goes, it's pretty straightforward. It's just Rake, which bleeds enemies on hit, and Herald of Blood chaining to do most of the heavy lifting here. Again, check the link for the exact support gems, but it's the ever popular poison and bursting plague chaining we've seen a bit of at this point. I find that with Rake, it helps to target monsters in the back of crowds and ranged enemies to get that innate extra damage from the leap portion of this skill. And honestly, you just spam that to clear maps. It's both a travel skill and a great clearer, though truth be told, the leap portion of the attack takes a little getting used to, basically feeling out what the maximum range is to trigger the jump when you click on a target. And also it just sometimes is janky and you'll get stuck, so just a little warning there, it takes a little experience to perform smoothly. As far as leveling goes, honestly, in the earliest parts of Act 1, I just straight up went with Bone Shatter Maze clearing and bossing, though you definitely want to start using a spear a good bit before reaching King in the Mist, probably at latest when you are progressing through the cemetery, and then honestly you just lean into spear skills for the most part. Like, Resonating Shield is the most shield part of this build early on because honestly we're mostly just using spear skills for bossing and clearing, though Resonating is good for also inflicting Herald of Blood chains when socketed with bleed, but we mostly use it to fully break boss armor. That aside, you basically use Rake, maybe a tap of Resonating Shield, and Disengage to start the Herald of Blood chains for clearing, and then we spam Rake a little more compared to the endgame version since Herald of Blood can't fully chain till much later, but when it comes to bosses, it's a lot of just spamming Rapid Assault and Explosive Spear to inflict damage and bleeds, which becomes even stronger later on during the playthrough. Just make sure those bosses have fully broken armor, and if you can time it, are heavy stunned when you detonate the stuck-in spears. And that's mostly what you use up until Act 4 when we transition into using shield wall bleeds to take down bosses, but it is kind of cool that with this build, if you get super unlucky with high armor shields, you can just rely on a decent spear instead, because those spear skills will still do decent single target damage. I really enjoy this build for both leveling and clearing, feels pretty good all the way through. Again, for more details, please refer to the MOBALYTICS link. I go into tons of detail there as far as like other options, the full list of support gems you should be using and prioritizing, etc. But we're going to keep things moving with the next build, my Avatar of Fire, Shield Wall Smith of Kitava. So this build plays quite differently. We are using Fortifying Cry and Resonating Shield for most of our clear while mapping, and as we're stacking a good bit of move speed while blocking on the passive skill tree, this can be a pretty quick and effective way to clear, as we have some sizable AoE and we are protected by active block at the same time. We also use Leap Slam for mobility, helps us jump over obstacles and over enemies to get to the juiciest part of a crowd to start clearing. We have Fortifying Cry socketed with Fiery Death as well, which assists when clearing and you have mobs chasing you. This is also something that takes some adjusting or getting used to, but feels pretty good once you get it down. All those exploding bodies can save you some inputs once you get a second nature of when they'll go off and how to get mobs to chase you, etc. When it comes to bossing, we basically have a whole weapon set dedicated to this purpose, so I just switched to weapon set 2, which I'll call our Ignite set, and we basically just want two things: a full rage bar and the boss to have the Sundered Armor debuff up before we start comboing our shield wall and Fortifying Cry. But I mean, that's basically it. And once again, just for fun, I did damage comparisons using Infernal Cry as my shield wall detonator instead of Fortifying Cry, and the damage was still very good, guys. Fortifying Cry is still ideal, and with the shotgun effect currently, bursts boss down a little faster, but this build deals some serviceable boss damage, I'd say. I'll also say that overall, this build, without a doubt, felt the tankiest out of the three I'll go over here, because this is due to the Smith of Kitava Ascendancy. We straight up get cold and lightning resistance from our fire resistance rolls at half value. That makes it easy to elemental cap resistances for early mapping, and even during the campaign, to be honest. And then later on, when we have the rest of our ascendancy points, we throw on a normal quality body armor to take advantage of some insanely strong survivability nodes like Kitava Engraving, boosting up our maximum life by 15%, or heat proofing, making us immune to all damaging ailments, 3% life regen from leather bindings, and even the 100% of armor applies to chaos damage. That's crazy. The list goes on, and there's just a good bit of personal preference here you can pursue. Honestly, with some decent armor and life stacking, you get to feel nigh invulnerable for little investment. Feels really good. Leveling for this build honestly treads a pretty classic warrior path, lots and lots of priming things for stuns and bone shattering for clears. One interesting note is that, for me personally, I mostly use dual wield maces for my damage in weapon set 2, while weapon set 1 has a shield for me to use Resonating Shield with, to block attacks and shield bash bosses with, etc. If you pursue this, make sure you set Bone Shatter to weapon set 2, and that you socket your dual wield mace strike with rapid attacks and rage early on, which does some honestly crazy DPS against some of the earlier bosses. I literally just dual wield Mace Strike to build up stun and rage, Infernal Cry and Bone Shatter for a big burst of damage, and then spam more dual wield Mace Strike for the vast majority of my bossing damage. This works pretty well for a big portion of the playthrough as long as you keep your maces somewhat up to date. But yeah, I mean, Bone Shatter is the way to go for the vast majority of the campaign for clearing all the way to like Act 4 and even into the interludes if you want. And Resonating Shield becomes the main way to prime mobs for stun sometime in Act 2 when you can socket it with Stun 1 and eventually Stun 2 later on. And for bossing, your maces do a lot of work up until maybe Act 4-ish or 3-ish if you're really lucky and you find an Enraged Warcry support gem in that act. Then you could socket Fortifying Cry and or Infernal Cry with it, and you don't have to worry about the cooldowns anymore, which means you can detonate empowered shield walls more frequently for our boss damage, you know, as long as you have the rage to bypass the cooldown. And sometime in Act 4 is when we transition to Avatar of Fire after we pick up the Molten One's gift on the passive skill tree to offset that 25% damage loss. That's when we can start using shield walls to inflict some decent ignites through the interludes and into early maps. But again, please check the MOBALYTICS link for all the details when it comes to the campaign progression, as there are more notes, alternatives, and suggestions in there. But yeah, that's what the Smith of Kitava build looks like. Real quick, I'm going to shout out my good friend Jorgen, who has a lot of expertise running shield builds with this particular Ascendancy. I think he may be rolling Titan this time around, though, because he wants to use Nightfall, as I do too, honestly. But check the link in the description box below to his channel and the videos. He's got a lot of great stuff and constantly shouts out other community builds. Great creator all around. But with that, I will move on to our last build. Hopefully you don't consider this third one a cop-out, because it is another Avatar of Fire shield wall build, but obviously on Warbringer this time around. And though it is similar to the Smith of Kitava build, there are several things that set it apart. Overall, this is a less tanky, more clearing and damage-focused version of the build, and to be frank, is easily the best at leveling. Being able to grab Warcaller's Bellow for 0 Warcry cooldowns in addition to the Corpse Explosion effect is pretty crazy to have as early as Act 2. Helps a lot with clearing and bossing, to the point that if you don't mind respecing later in the game, you could technically level with the Warbringer Ascendancy and swap it later on. But yeah, when it comes to clearing in the endgame, this is where the builds differ most. With the Smith of Kitava version of the build, we'd spam Resonating Shield to shoot out shield waves from Fortifying Cry, and we'd wipe most things this way, and the stragglers were taken care of with like Herald of Ash and Fiery Death. However, with the Warbringer build, we have access to, as I just mentioned, Warcaller's Bellow. When you scale enough AoE with your Warcries, this can deal tons of damage while clearing, to the point that you can just leap into a crowd, shoot out one shield wave, then spam some shouts to cascade an AoE that just expands outwards from you. It's honestly super satisfying to perform. I find as I'm running a map, I'm often just spamming Fortifying Cry and Resonating Shield, just alternating the keybinds here, sometimes shouting more than Resonating Shield, as you can just keep wiping mobs with that cascade effect. Really fun to use and feels really strong, to be honest, though ironically we don't want to use Fiery Death on this build, as the Corpse Explode from the Warcry spam does 20-ish% more damage than with the support gem, so we want to make sure that we're detonating all corpses with the Warcries instead. For bossing, the combo here is the same by using Weapon Set 2 as our Ignite set, making sure we have a full rage bar and the boss has Sundered Armor up before we blast them down with a shield wall, empowered by Infernal Cry and detonated with Fortifying Cry. However, unlike the Smith of Kitava version, we have some really nice quality of life when it comes to performing this. One is that you can literally just spam Infernal Cry with how it is socketed until you have full rage before the fight even starts, so you can start the fight with a full rage bar. Another is that with our Ascendancy, we have innate armor breaking with each hit we do, which makes maintaining the armor break debuff super easy. We can break armor into the negatives as well, which is just more damage, and all hits now benefit from fully broken armor, so we save a few passive skill tree points since we don't need Molten One's gift after we take that Ascendancy node. These effects also have great synergy with Punctured Lung, which is set to Weapon Set 2, and what this does is it prevents targets with fully broken armor from regenerating life. So this is really useful against bosses that have a second phase where they refill their health bar for it, and they just won't do that if they have fully broken armor. This is really, really strong against bosses like Uber Arbiter and the Excavation boss, etc. Maybe some of the new ones too. Any bosses that have to regenerate their life for their second phase will no longer be able to. You basically can skip the second phase if you deal enough damage to them in the first one. Pretty interesting. We also get Encase in Jade, which grants us a big chunk of guard on demand based on your maximum life, and additionally just gives us a flat extra 10% physical damage reduction as a passive. Honestly, I've grown to like this skill more and more, and is where a significant part of our survivability on this build comes from. And yeah, leveling is very similar to the Smith of Kitava, using Bone Shatters and Resonating Shield, though again, having Warcaller's Bellow is a huge boon from Act 2 and onwards. Lets you use your war cries at any time to explode corpses to assist with clearing during the campaign, and you are able to spam detonate shield walls with Warcry during boss fights, or whip that combo out on a stubborn rare more easily on top of saving you support gem sockets on your Warcries because you no longer have to bypass the cooldown using Rage with Enraged Warcry. Pretty big indirect damage buff to Fortifying Cry with that in mind. Alright guys, that's basically it. A bit of a different type of video for me this time around. I normally don't do dedicated League starter videos, but I wanted to give you guys more than one option for shield builds that have risen from the ashes of the 0.5 nerfs, essentially. If I had to sum up each build very simply, it'd be like this. The Spear and Shield Bleed Titan feels the most reliable in how it will perform in the endgame, since it is least affected by the nerfs this time around. And the Avatar of Fire Shield Smith of Kitava feels the absolute tankiest and best on a budget. You'll have, it's so nice not having to worry about elemental resistance caps and being so tanky, via being immune to ailments and life regen, etc. And the Warbringer build just feels crazy good for map clearing. As you guys know, I normally go into a lot more detail in my dedicated build videos, which I'm going to make for each one of these builds. But again, please check those MOBALYTICS links, as they have a ton of information on them, things like snapshots of what the passive skill tree should look like during certain acts of the campaign, skill gem and support gem progression and priority, etc. And I plan on importing these builds into the in-game version of these build guides as soon as I can. I think MOBALYTICS announced that they are going to be adding this feature very soon. So there it is, take your pick. These are all viable builds for tackling the endgame in 0.5. As for me personally, I think I'm going to go a Titan version of the Smith of Kitava build, simply because I plan on experimenting with a Titan build and Nightfall, that shield we've all been drooling over. But I think there's potential Smith of Kitava synergy with that one too, honestly, involving like max frost resistance and, again, tankiness aside from the obvious slam stuff. So that's what I'm going to pursue as well. Anyways, thanks for watching. Again, please check those links out in the description and favorite them to follow along as I update them. But that's going to be it for this video. Good luck to you all on your league start, and I'll see you in the next one.